October is now in full swing with Apple's October 18th Unleashed event announcement. Expected at this event are new M1X or M2 Max, but in this video I particularly want to focus on the MacBook Pro. So the MacBook Pro design has stuck around for about 5 years now without any real major redesign. Yeah, the 16-inch got a bit of a display, like the bezels got a bit thinner, but no actual design overhaul across the entire line in 5 years. And this redesign is expected to follow in the footsteps of the iPad and the iPhone redesigns that we've gotten in the past couple of years. So flat sides, that's what we're expecting. We're also expecting mini LED displays, which is pretty huge. And we're also expecting thinner bezels all across. Now, I've never really thought that the MacBook bezels were really that thick at all. That's never really occurred to me. But especially with the competition getting thinner and thinner bezels, like especially the Dell XPSs that were announced last year, the MacBooks are a bit behind. I'm personally a big fan of the Macs probably receiving this new boxy, squared off design. I just really like the design language Apple has been pushing out with their devices in the past couple of years. I think the Macs will look really cool with this. It may be a tiny bit unergonomic, but then again, I mean, with the iPad, Steve Jobs said, I think it curves because it's easier to hold. Same goes for the iPhone. Those all switched over to these square edges and stuff, and I don't really mind it that much. Now, one of the biggest changes that we were expecting last year that didn't quite happen, but probably will hopefully happen this year, is the 13-inch MacBook Pro turning into a 14-inch MacBook Pro in roughly the same footprint, and this will probably be achieved by thinning the bezels. I think that many people have been looking forward to a 14-inch MacBook Pro. I've not really used a 13-inch laptop, and the 14-inch form factor is just perfect for me, so I'm definitely looking forward to this. A 14-inch MacBook Pro also does give you a lot more real estate in the same footprint. And for the mini LED screens that I mentioned earlier, we saw this come to the 12.9-inch iPad Pro earlier this year, and it'll presumably carry on to these MacBook Pros this year. And I think that's maybe what it was hinting to, like the whole Unleashed dots flying thing. I think that might have been hinting to mini LED. I don't really mind that much. MacBook displays are already great. Mini LED will only put them over the top, just like the iPad. I guess this will be a bigger deal for creative professionals, especially ones that do video editing, photo editing, and stuff like that, as well as a lot of people who just love to consume media. But that's definitely a welcome feature, as is possible rumors of getting ProMotion on the MacBook Pros. I think that ProMotion makes more sense on touch-based devices just because you interact with it, you feel it more. When I just went to the Apple Store and I played with the iPhones for a bit, and then I compared it to the iPad's ProMotion, I noticed it more on an iPad, probably just because it was a bigger screen. I didn't really care too much about it on an iPhone, but it was nice. So I wonder how it'll be on a MacBook. I mean, the new Surface devices just came out with ProMotion, and there are also a couple of rumors about a new 1080p webcam. I don't think we need that as much anymore just because of the ISP that came with M1, making a 720p webcam look so much better. But lastly, I think lots of people are excited for this, the return of MagSafe, but not really returning as MagSafe. So MagSafe basically has been stolen by the iPhone and that entire accessory ecosystem, but we could see at least a magnetic power connector similar to the one on the iMac, although hopefully it pulls out a lot easier, arrive on the MacBooks, which I think will be quite cool. Lots of people already like the original proprietary MagSafe and MagSafe 2 connectors. And segueing into ports, we are supposed to be seeing the return of some pre-2015 MacBook Pro ports arrive on this MacBook, particularly HDMI and the SD card slot. And I think that the SD card slot is pretty much an unkillable port. HDMI, I guess, might be replaced by USB-C sooner or later. But if these new MacBooks do end up coming out with these ports, that just shows that Apple's, well, now 5-year crusade of everything switching to USB-C clearly hasn't really worked. I guess it's them silently admitting defeat, much like the butterfly keyboard turning into the magic keyboard. And I'm pretty excited about this, except for one thing, and that's that might cut away from the USB-C ports, especially now that you have HDMI and an SD card reader that's basically 2 dongles gone. I can definitely see why Apple would remove ports, but I just kind of hope that they still keep them. But what you probably came here for is the specs, and these are supposed to be, well, a pretty good upgrade. So these are expected to come out with either the M1X or the M2 chip. It's still kind of unclear. The M1X would be a variant of the M1, and the M2 would probably be just an upgraded M1. I think that the M1X is probably for the more pro-focused devices, so the higher-end MacBook Pros, iMac Pro, if we get that back, iMac 27-inch or 32-inch, whatever it's going to be. Whereas like the M1 and the possible M2 is probably for like the entry-level MacBook Air, iMac 24-inch, lower-end MacBook Pro, Mac Mini maybe. That'll probably come out with those devices next year. But I'm betting that this is the M1X, even though it would make sense for them to just go for the M2 this year since it's been a year already. M1X just makes more sense for the pros. And M1X MacBook Pro was also one of their tags, I think, in the April event. And Apple is still yet to refresh most of its Pro devices in the Mac line right now, so I'm going with that. Anyways, this M1X chip is set to bring 12 CPU cores, 8 high performance cores, and 4 high efficiency cores. That's an upgrade from the M1, which only had 4 high performance cores. And that combined with an upgraded 16 core GPU that we're expecting. That's double the cores in the M1. This all makes this chip draw a bit more power. I'm sure there are a couple of leaked benchmark scores out there somewhere, but the M1 was already fast. I think it scored 7,000-ish in the multi-core department on Geekbench 5, and then I think around 20,000 in the metal department. So maybe these new chips could hit like 10,000 in the multi-core department, 25,000 in the metal department. I'm just spitballing here. I haven't looked at any leaked benchmarks, so if I do find any, I'll definitely link them down below. Now, as for the RAM, there are conflicting reports saying either 16 or 32 gigs of RAM will arrive to these MacBooks. I'm thinking that they will bring 32. M1X would be a variant of the M1, so it may not bring 32, but I think especially if they're going to be targeting, higher end consumers, prosumers with these MacBooks, particularly if they're refreshing the 16-inch MacBook Pro and the 4-port 13-inch MacBook Pro, or well, now maybe 14-inch MacBook Pro, then they're definitely going to have to add 32 gigs of RAM there. And also another long-awaited feature, these Macs are set to support up to 3 displays over just one external display from the M1 Max, which was kind of disappointing. So yeah, a lot more creative, professional uses for these MacBook Pros that we should expect. Now last is the release, and this is where M1X or M2 is getting a bit confusing. So I guess it's pretty much confirmed this event is going to be a Mac event. Apple really can't refresh anything else in their line. We already had the iPhone refresh. 3/4 of the iPad lineup got refreshed this year, so maybe we can see an iPad Air at this event. I wouldn't count on it though. And Unleashed, I think that's hinting to the unleashed power of Apple Silicon, that these will be a significant step up from the M1 Max from last year. I don't think they would title it Unleashed or make this event so cool if they were hinting at like a new HomePod or AirPods. So it's really just a question of which Macs are coming at this event. My guess is the Mac Mini will maybe get a refresh. MacBook Pros for sure will be getting a refresh, I hope. Possibly an iMac 27-inch, and I'm really hoping that the MacBook Air does get a refresh here, although I'm not really sure if it will. And that's also another separate video, because there's a bunch of redesign leaks and rumors about that I'd love to cover. But yeah, if it is the M1X chip that we see here, then the M2's equipped Macs will probably come next June or so. So that's pretty much it for the video. There's a lot to be looking forward to at this event for a lot of people. So let me know what you think, what you want to see from this event down in the comments below. But thank you so much for watching, and that's pretty much it for me.